Okay, well, good evening and welcome to our monthly Thomas Merton discussion group. Those of you who are new to us, each month we discuss one of Merton's books, and over the years we've read dozens and dozens of them. Our real world home is St. Rose Parish in Belmar, New Jersey. Since COVID, we've been meeting online, Zoom. As a result, our group is able to welcome folks from near and far. Tonight is a definite upgrade, though, to our usual meeting. Glenn Cashin, a longtime member, is a cousin of Kathy O'Callahan. In a few minutes, I'll ask Glenn, who is a New Jersey resident, to tell us briefly how he discovered the O'Callahan branch of his family and how this evening came about. Perhaps another time we'll invite Bruce Springsteen to join us because Bruce Springsteen is also a cousin. No pressure, Kathy, no pressure at all. In 2016, Kathy O'Callahan founded Hearts and Homes for Refugees, the first volunteer-driven community nonprofit organization to resettle refugees in Westchester County, New York. Since then, Hearts and Homes for Refugees has been inspiring, educating, and equipping volunteers and supporters to welcome, settle, and assist more than 500 refugees, now considered neighbors. Last year, the U.S. State Department introduced a national platform similar to Hearts and Homes called Welcome Corps. Kathy's professional experience includes 17 years as a business owner, a managing director of a global public relations firm, and as press secretary for a member of the United States House of Representatives. Kathy was recognized as a Pelham, New York Woman of Distinction in 2017 and 2024, and was named Person of the Year by the Pelham Civic Association in 2019. Born and raised in Louisville, Kentucky, Kathy is married to Bruno Walmsley. They have 4 grown children and 8 grandchildren. What brings Kathy to us this evening is her association with Trappist monk Thomas Merton. And yes, she's Glenn Cashin's cousin. As a child, she and her siblings came to know the famous Father Lewis simply as Uncle Tom. So now I'll turn things over to Glenn. We'll be handing things back and forth tonight. I'll turn things over to Glenn to introduce Kathy. Okay? So Glenn, go ahead, please.
Thanks, Greg. Well, a little background. I've been researching my family history for probably 2+ decades. Ancestry.com is very accommodating in providing scores of possible DNA matches. And in July 2021, I reached out to one of my matches, Michael Cronin, and began an off and on correspondence with him. In mid-2022, I found out that Michael lived in Louisville. And I just happened to mention that my interest in Merton and the fact that Karen and I, who's sitting next to me, had visited Louisville, the Abbey, and Bellarmine University several years ago. I was taken aback when Michael came back and told me that of his family's connection to Thomas Merton. Michael is the son of the sister of Frank O'Callahan, and as referenced in Greg's flyer earlier, that relationship and Thomas Merton is very close. Frank and his wife Tommy were exceptionally good friends of Thomas Merton. It is reported, as a matter of fact, that Tommy was initially in awe of Merton, and the first time he went to their house for lunch, she served him lamb chops. Quote, "Good meat for this poor guy who never got it," unquote. Their friendship soon became comfortable enough for peanut butter sandwiches thereafter. And in September 2023, Michael introduced me to Kathy, his cousin, and the oldest of 7 children of Frank and Tommy O'Callahan. And Kathy and I have corresponded off and on over the past several months. Our common ancestors are Christopher and Catherine Garrity from Merton, County Kildare, Ireland. They were married, Christy as it's called, and Catherine were married on 8 February 1827 at a site in Rathangan, of which I visited, Karen and I visited in October, and I'll be going back again next month. Kathy's lineage descends from the Garrities to the Haggertys to the O'Callahans. My lineage descends from Garrity to Farrell to McNicholas to Cashin. And Kathy is, as mentioned, my third cousin once removed. So I was incredibly pleased that Kathy readily agreed to join our group to share her family recollections of Merton and answer some questions. So without further ado, Kathy, I will turn it over to you. You have to unmute.
I know. I'm muted because I've been having a cough and a cold. So if I mute myself, it's because I'm going to spasm. Thank you so much, my long lost cousin. Oh, I'm so glad we connected. I had no idea. Just proves if you search long enough, you'll never know what you turn up. And thank you, Greg, for having me, and both of you. I had said to you along the way, please don't oversell this. I guarantee every single person here has read more Merton, is more passionate about his works, and more scholarly than I. But I'm happy to be here, and I'm honored that you would even consider inviting me. I want to give a shout out to a couple of people. Mary Somerville, it's so nice to see you. It's been a long time. I also
yes, and I want to thank you, and I want to apologize ahead of time because I have to leave a little early to go to a Tuesdays with Merton talk.
Oh, yes.
With the ITMS. Thank you,
Yes.
Kathy.
And Hugh, thank you for your book and your lovely letter. I was in Louisville last weekend and met with Paul Pearson, who shared some background with me. But I have a question, Hugh. Did we speak at some point along the way? Just need to know, because people have reached out and talked in the past and asked me questions. And honestly, I'm sorry, I don't remember.
I've never ever. Can you hear me? I'm just.
Yes.
I'm learning to unmute. I don't even know how to turn the camera on, but I did. I did not ever. I know we've never spoken.
Oh, good. Well, it's nice to speak now and meet you. And
I'm very impressed with your mother, by the way. I think I told you that in a letter.
That was very nice of you to say. Thank you. Yes. She was an impressive sort. She was a force. And I'm sorry that none of my siblings are here. You would see bits and pieces of my mother in all of us. And it's, it was no surprise to us that there were so many people in and out of our lives growing up, because our house was like a revolving door. So, that this man named Father Lewis or Thomas Merton would come in his overalls or come to our house was not a big deal, because he was just one of many people that she took under her wing, along with my father, who supported her in every way, with the guests, the homeless people, the monks, the gay people in the community who were, struggling at that time. Later on, it was the Vietnamese refugees and the people from Albania, and so many people just in and out as I was growing up. So this man was not a big deal, except that he lived in a great place, and we used to pack the car and go out to this beautiful place with doting monks who loved children, because so many of them were childlike themselves. And we got to hang out and have free run of, the lake or the pond and the picnic grounds, and everyone was always having such a great time, and a lot of beer to go with it. So we were fortunate, I guess, that we had these family outings, and this man named Uncle Tom, who one of my biggest regrets is that I wasn't old enough to really appreciate who he was and what he stood for, and how special it was to have this relationship with him. You asked me to talk about memories. I think the picnics are the greatest memories. The other memories I have is that when he would come to Louisville, it was for usually doctor's appointments, but they could extend, the whole day and into the night. And he would be there at our house having dinner, or going out with my parents, and I know he loved jazz, blues, jazz. And they would go out to a part of Louisville that I later discovered as a teenager and stay out all hours listening to music. So he was a friend to my mom and dad. They loved the same things. And when he was around, mom didn't bug us too much to do all the things she was usually asking us to do, like fold laundry, change someone's diaper, etc. So we liked him for that as well. He was a distraction. He was Uncle Tom. I don't know if you want to show the picnic film now. You want me to do that? Is this a good time?
Yeah, sure.
So, right, one of my sisters found some video. And so I'm going to play it. I'm going to try to share my screen and play it with you. I don't know who is videotaping this or filming this if my father was there.
Yes.
Mom would pack us in the station wagon and pack so much food. And I don't know if I remember this or if I've read this, but Tom always had specific requests and told her what to bring, which wasn't a problem because she knew how to cook for masses.
Which of the girls is yours? Is Kathy? Or...
Me?
Yeah, go back. Can you go back?
I'll come back. Oh, I should show up again. Hold on. I make a funny face early on. Let me see if it's there. Not one of ours. That's not me. That's my sister Diane. That's me.
Yeah.
So I can tell for sure.
We might have known, being the eldest.
That's right. It's an obvious shot.
Now they call it a photo. Now they call it a photo bomb.
That's right. That's my sister Nancy, my sister Colleen to her left. That's me again. That's my sister Sarah, bottom left. My younger siblings don't have a lot of recollection of Merton, probably more the stories about him. I don't know if anyone from my family is on. Do you, on the Zoom call? Glenn, do you see anyone?
Not that I
I don't think I would know.
Well, they would have their name calling.
No, I don't see anyone. No.
Well, you all know who that is.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then there was someone else that I didn't recognize, but you did, right, Glenn? Okay, that's it.
I think Greg did.
Greg, it was Bob Lax?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That him right there?
No, that's Mom and Merton.
There's Lax there.
There he is.
Okay.
Right there?
Yes, that's it.
Okay. Okay, there we are. Nancy.
That's such a sweet picture.
How old were you at this point, Kathy?
I think this was in 60. I had to be 10. I think I was around 10.
And somebody's aiming a camera at you so much of the time and you don't know who it was.
I have no idea. I don't know. You know, John Howard Griffin was at our picnics at times. And I know that because I don't know if he would have been here at this time.
Mm-hmm.
John Howard Griffin showed me, and that's the end of this.
Was that your mother?
Where?
Could scroll back a second or two there.
That's my mother.
Okay.
And that's my father.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Very nice.
And there he is.
Now,
anyway,
Kathy, you mentioned John Howard Griffin. Can you remember other folks who may be familiar to people that you remember? Given
Well,
that,
the monks, I remember, I mean, Brother Pat, of course, and was there, Brother Maurice. Some of our favorite brothers were there. Maurice was the most fun. He was the most childlike. He played with us. And then he was shipped off to Georgia, I believe. But we used to go see him down there in the Abbey on our way to Florida. Darn it, I wish my sisters were here. A couple of them might remember. There was I'll tell you a story I remember. I hope it's no one on this. No, it wouldn't be anyone on this.
but we won't squeal. We won't tell on you.
I remember, I think this was the first time I remember that this man was someone that people really, were in awe of. There was a nun who came, I believe, on a picnic. And I say that because I think I remember a photo of her around the picnic blanket. And I know she came back to our house at some point because there was a red wool, like a poncho or a sweater, large poncho. And it was probably South American. There was a bird on it or something. And I believe it had belonged to Merton, or somehow he was sitting on it or wearing it. I don't remember what. I just remember that she was so persistent in begging my mother to give her this.
Yeah, it was
whatever it was. She was in awe.
That was Sister Therese Lentfort.
Oh, is she with us?
No, no. She's not with anyone right now. I mean, no, that's right.
Well,
she was very put out. She wanted that poncho.
Is that a story that is in a book?
Yeah.
Okay.
I interrupted you.
No, that was all I remember. And I was kind of struck by it because people weren't usually that persistent, and especially with my mother. So, and I'm not sure what the end result was. Did she get? Oh, my musical came. I had none. Oh, I was learning to play the guitar. And you have to understand, when you are one of 7 and you have the spotlight for all of 11 months before number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, number 6, and number 7 coming along, you don't stay on anyone's radar very long, except as a group, right? And I started guitar lessons, and I'd probably had one guitar lesson. And I remember knowing 3 chords, C, D,
G.
And G. Yes. Yeah. And G. And Tom, I had a guitar and I brought it out, and he said, "Oh, you playing, whatever." And I said, he goes, let's go make up a song. Show me what you know," is what he said. So I went into the library. No one else was there. You don't get a lot of single time in a family of 7. And he singled me out and we wrote a song. And I remember the words, and there's no way that I have committed this to memory because I've seen them written down. And I'll tell you why that is in a minute. But here are the words with those 3 chords. "Old Uncle Tom, he lived in the woods, pining away without adequate food. He is all alone and thin as a bone, living on bacon, and is all alone." And that was it. I must have played that song repeatedly as the only song I knew, because that would be how I knew what the words are. We could get Bruce to sing it. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I'll look into that. Yeah.
The reason I know that I don't remember the song. Anybody else have any
questions that they want to pose to Kathy?
Let me just finish.
Go ahead. Sorry.
The reason I know that I memorized those words only from that moment and not many other viewings of it is because he wrote the words, or I wrote the words on the back of a book, on the inside cover of a book. In the book, to this day, it was a weird cover. It's like, what is this dog doing with a cigarette in its mouth? Right? That was the cover of the book. Well, there was a cigarette hanging out of a dog, and I think it was a gray dog. We had a lot of them. Weimaraners. Anyway, it was a dog and a cigarette. And I remember that book. And we had it in our library for a long time. The book is gone. It was not among any of my mother's the filing cabinets. It wasn't in her bookshelves. I looked for it. I've asked people. I've asked Paul Pearson. That book disappeared.
Yeah. Kathy, could you tell us something about years later when you learned of Merton's passing?
Yeah, good question.
Oh, I remember exactly where I was. So we obviously had left, and the door, someone knocked at the door. We had a house, there was a circle patio and a big heavy wooden door. And someone knocked on the door, and Dan Walsh came in, and I feel like he had his hat in his hand. He always wore this hat, and he had in his hand, and he had this just disturbed look on his face. Is your mother here? And I said, well, yes, she's in the kitchen. And
And you're about 12 now?
I was 12. It
Yeah.
was, yeah. And all I remember is that look on his face, and he found my mother. And honestly, I don't remember anything else. I don't remember anything else. I think everyone went into high gear. Anything I've heard about it since has been, you know, the story from others or read about it, but I don't remember anything else.
Did you all go to the funeral?
Oh, it would be at the monastery. Did we go? I don't remember.
Okay, that's fine.
I don't remember.
That's fine. You were 12. That's
Yeah,
fine.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
How about, do you remember your mother's involvement with the trust?
Oh, yes. It took over our basement. Filing cabinets were brought in. It was her office. It took a good part of her life. She was always coming and going in a way she hadn't before. Um,
Now, Kathy,
a
that was
lot.
the entirety, was that the entirety of Merton's publications? What was in the trust?
Well, you're not asking the right person. Okay. What I know later, what I've learned, because all of the filing cabinets that were downstairs, I know that things came from the monastery. I have heard this. So they kept coming in and more was added to it. Mary Somerville will know because Mary helped mom go through it at one point. What was there, what was removed, what wasn't brought, I can't answer that. And Paul, of course, would know. Mary, can you
Mary,
help
yeah.
with that
Yeah, Mary,
answer?
please.
Yes, and I know that Tommy played a big role in getting everything from the monastery to Bellarmine University to the Merton Center. She had a great role in that. The point that I did work for Tommy and helped her with her books and her files. That was a great joy to me. I saw amazing things. Um, I would just say that Tommy also is the one who nominated me to become a trustee, for which I'm eternally grateful. And over the years, she would say, do you still want to be a trustee? And I said, do you think I'm qualified? She said, oh, yes. Oh, now I am. Yes. I've been a trustee since 2009.
Mhm.
But Merton wrote over 70 books during his lifetime. There's still things being published because he must not have slept. There were so many things that he wrote, letters, um, journals.
Kath,
But that's enough of me.
no, we're happy to hear that. What would you say about your mother's I'll say relationship? Was it more as not business especially, but a friend rather than as a reader-author relationship?
I would I would say as a friend first, but a friend who provided thoughts and listened, and she always had an opinion, but I don't know, how much of a scholar she was later on. Certainly, I think she had more time, but really a friend and someone who, they couldn't just sit there and drink beer together without talking about some pretty serious things. And my mother could be very introspective and have opinions and learn. And I am sure that she learned a lot from Tom. And it solidified, both her and dad's relationship because, I mean, she valued so much of what, she was a convert. She wasn't Catholic. So they shared that. And And so I think there was that common ground. I think she knew what our family offered to him in the way of, family and something he didn't have. And I don't know if you all, I did ask one of my siblings for something, and I'll share it with you if you'd like me to read it.
Sure.
My brother-in-law, Pete Curvin, has always been proud of this because he's married to my sister, Diane, and she's number 3 in the lineup. And if you've read Learning to Love, his Journal of Thomas Merton, Volume 6, in 1966, he entered this on July 3rd. Journal entry, July 3rd. The O'Callaghan's often visited on Sundays. That's what he wrote. I am curiously fond of little Diane O'Callaghan. All of those children, but somehow, especially Diane, who for some reason I sense to be more complicated and more vulnerable. There is a great curiosity between us and a strange sort of attraction, which at times makes her moody and aloof, and then suddenly breaks out in a kind of childlike passion, as when we were playing in the water and she swam to me and began climbing all over me and holding on to me desperately, saying, "You're all warm, you're all warm." She is, I think, 9 years old or 10, and I think he was right, so I was a little older. I feel a great tenderness and care for her, and I want her to grow up happy. And I think she will probably know a lot of anguish, but she has a mind of her own and a precious heart.
Oh, sweet. Very
So it is sweet. And
Mhm.
so I think that, what my mom took from this and my dad and what Merton got from these relationships were informed all of their hearts and their minds, and maybe his writing. I don't know.
Kathy, there's notice of a party at your folks' house where Merton had a little too much of the enjoyment of the evening, and there was champagne involved. Would the children have been around when there was partying going on, or
Where were they going to send us? And it was frequent. Trust me, it was a party household. Yeah, no, I was going to say which time. Maybe that's the one they wrote about. I mean, I don't, he'd come in and enjoy a beer, and then other monks learned that you could go in and Tommy's and a doctor's appointment and have a beer or two. But yeah, we were around all their parties. Heck,
How
we were
about
awakened, gotten out of bed to come down and listen to the music, whether it was jazz music or Vladimir Ashkenazi, who was in Louisville for a a performance brought back to the house. We'd get awakened at 1 or 2 in the morning to come down and party.
how about the story about, I think it's Colleen who got his hospital bracelet as a gift?
Maybe.
Yeah, I mean,
What did she do with it? Oh, when he was at St. Joseph's. Yeah.
No, I just didn't know if there was, if she still has it or if there's any awareness of it in the family. No, it's just another thing.
Just another thing. I'll ask, but
It's
I
another,
doubt it.
it's another thing worth a fortune, Kathy. You might want to look into it.
Well, I won't tell her. I'll just take it.
That's right.
While I'm writing singing the song, yes.
That's right.
Kathy, an example of Merton's humor regarding your family is an excerpt from the Road to Joy book, where there are several letters written to Tommy. Merton sent Tommy O'Callaghan, then pregnant with her 7th child, a cartoon by Richter depicting a family of bareback riders standing on a galloping horse, with the wife saying, "Darling, I have something to tell you. We're going to need a bigger horse."
That was Merton?
That was Merton, yeah.
Mhm.
Anyway.
Yeah, easy for him to laugh at that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, when that child was born, Glenn, that was the first boy, John, and we went around. My mother and father called him Jesus Jr. So
that's a good one.
That's great.
He did not fulfill those expectations, however.
Oh,
He was
oh.
no, when he was 12 and 13, he wasn't turning water into wine. He was stealing the car and driving all over town. Yes.
Oh, Oh,
But he turned out just fine. Who
if
wouldn't with
anyone,
all those
Do,
sisters?
if
do your
anyone else,
do your siblings live nearby, or where are they all located now?
I'm in New York. Nancy lives in Fort Smith, Arkansas. Diane lives in Louisville. Colleen lives in LA or Ventura. Kim lives in Louisville. Sarah lives in Louisville. And John lives in Louisville.
nice, nice. Does anyone else have a question? If you raise your hand, Kathy can unmute you and you can ask your question. Jackie?
It's great having you here. You are such fun. Um, anyway, but I wanted to get serious in reading the letters from, Road to Joy to your mom. She was sick in the hospital, really seriously sick. And she was going to have bed rest when she got home. And Merton was kind of half envying your mom all that wonderful bed rest and then doubting whether he could take it himself if it lasted too long. But I just wondered what was it that your mother was sick with? She had a surgery.
I remember that. She had a spinal fusion.
Oh.
And she was so she wasn't sick. She'd had too many children and she had spinal fusion, and she was in bed for like 6 weeks. It's funny, I just ran across like a little diary, and it was on each line was everyone who dropped by to bring food while she was in bed for 6 weeks. So I'm sure it was necessary, that 6 weeks, but I'm sure it was enjoyed every minute by my mom. Yeah, I do remember that. It was, I guess our lives didn't change too much, but there was a lot of care coming in and out of the house. So that's all I remember.
Yeah, but
your mother was very aware of food, right? I mean, well, you can tell more about it, but I can remember being down there once, and there was going to be a trip from Bellarmine to the Abbey, and we stopped by your mother's place to pick up the box lunches for the trip.
Oh yes, my mother opened a catering business. An extension of what she'd done in her first life or in her current life, because she was feeding the masses anyway in her family.
Yeah.
And so someone wants in, hold on. And so, she would do the box lunches and she'd cook for the monks and bring things, they'd have her lunches. In fact, my sister just went out last weekend when we were all in Louisville. No one else could go. She went to the monastery to see mom and dad's grave. And she got in touch with, I think, Paul, the writer Brother Quenon.
Yes.
And she said, I asked him, would he like me to bring something like mom used to do? She said there was a long pause and she told him, oh, you would like me to bring something? Fine, I'll bring. And I think she took turkey tetrazzini, which was a favorite. So following in my mother's footsteps. So my mother did have a restaurant and catering business later on. And then I know that you probably know this too, but at one point, the Dalai Lama came to Gethsemane and mom did the cooking. Yeah. And, there was always so much food and beer.
Wow. Thank you so much for answering that.
Tommy gave the most incredible dinner parties I've ever been to with famous people. John Deere, Bob Giroux, who was Merton's first editor. I mean, and the food was phenomenal too. But Tommy was the hostess with the mostest. I just will never forget those dinner parties.
It's funny. Are you still on, Lou Doyle? Lou, if you can hear me. The other day I was talking to Lou. Lives here in New York, and she is in our circle of refugee work. And we were talking the other day, and she said, I think you said that John Deere was speaking somewhere, right?
Yes.
Lou?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, he spoke at St. Charles Borromeo in Harlem just Sunday morning. He was the homilist at the 8 and the 10 o'clock mass, and then at 12 o'clock fueled by like 10 cups of coffee at that point, he he gave a talk that lasted about 45 minutes. Yeah, and then he was taking off for Louisville. I think he was taking off for Kentucky the next day.
You know, when you told me the name, it sounded so familiar, but you know, what do I remember? So yeah, that's why I knew the name. And you know, my mom's love of food, if you think about it, food was the connector to the picnics, to Merton, to the Abbey, to the monks, to our family, to friends, to, you know, people who came through our house. And it didn't matter who you were. You're right. She had great dinner parties. And in my line of work and what I do, one of the stories and one of the things we look to is food as a great connector to the refugees and to the immigrants that we're serving, because food in their countries and food here is a great, beautiful way to connect. So, you know, tonight starts Eid celebration,
Right.
and tomorrow's the big celebration. There'll be so much food, and you know, I'm invited to participate and partake in their food. It's more food than I can handle, but when we have new families from whatever part of the country, we make sure that if we're having a volunteer appreciation or a family gathering we do every year, everyone brings something, and food always makes things kind of seamless, and it's the shared pastime, identity, cultural common thread. So it's understandable that my mother was into food because she knew what it could connect us to.
Yeah. Kathy, could you tell about your father's relationship with Merton?
Yeah. Well, first you have to understand my father. He was a saint. He was a father to 6 girls and a husband to my mother. And no one had more patience. Mary's going to nod in agreement here. But it was never, you know, martyr way or, you know, put upon. He was right in there, and he loved Merton. I mean, he, you know, appreciated and loved Merton the same way that my mother did. And there was never, I mean, can I say it was, he didn't just go along. He was an active part of their life, you know, with the monastery, with Merton, with Dan Walsh. He was always there.
I think Marilyn has a question.
Yes, I have just a comment. I invited Tommy to come and speak at the Chicago chapter many years ago, and she flew in for the afternoon, and we met her at the airport, of course, took her out to lunch, and so she and I were doing question and answer back and forth. What was it like? What would she like to share about Thomas Merton? It was just so memorable. We do have a CD of it somewhere. I gave one to one family member. I'm not sure who has it, but I have a copy also. So when I was going on my way down to Georgia to visit family, she said, be sure and stop by our house and spend the night. So I took her up on it, and she showed me the guest room that had all these photos of Merton and just memorabilia everywhere. It was just such a delight. But I'll always treasure Frank standing, making a wonderful strawberry salad, cutting up the strawberries and putting all these ingredients in it, made salad dinner for all of us. He didn't want his wife to have to cook. It was just very, very precious, and I'll always treasure it. So then we would look each other up when we would go to conferences. But I was just so blessed by her and just her unassuming and gratitude attitude. He says, I'm so grateful for everything I've been blessed with. I'll always treasure that.
Thank you for sharing that, Marilyn. I would love to find out where I could get a copy of that, of what you recorded in Chicago. We gave, I don't know if you know this, but when we sold Mom's house, we took the filing cabinets. There were 3 huge, they're called Fire Kings. And we must have had a bulldozer getting them out of the house and put them in a storage unit at an office building where they sat for years, because not just those, but trunks of my parents' homes. And it was just a daunting task to tackle it. And no one really wanted, it took 5 years, I think, at least.
Oh, it's just so monumental work.
It is. And that's when Mary stepped in and sort of tried to help. And then, and we decided finally, I put it to my family that we needed to do something, and that each of us taking pieces of this was going to be meaningless. What were we going to do with it? Put it on our, in our own drawers at home and never share it? So we agreed as a family and at the right time to turn this over to obviously the Merton Center. And we did. And it was such a good decision, because if we ever want to visit, if we ever want to see what has been curated and what has been, what's been duplicated, they take out the duplications, but we can go there and have access to everything. So it's, I asked Paul, they haven't even finished going through everything. I think it'll take a few years. But one of the funny story, one of the Fire Kings, they lost the key to it. They could not get into it. The company, I don't know what they had to do, but it took at least, I think, a year and at great expense to get that thing opened. They saw it wasn't our problem anymore.
Oh, no.
But Paul fixed it.
I remember when Tommy knew that Frank was going to go before her, she said, I'm a Lutheran pastor. So she said, promise me you'll come down here when he goes to heaven. And I did promise her, and I did go down to Kentucky for the funeral. And then, of course, I went back for her funeral.
So we must
She's very ecumenical. She thought it was just very normal that I should be a Lutheran pastor and love Merton. So now I'm coordinating the Dubuque group. I go back and forth. I have family in Dubuque.
Your father was the third, right, Kathy? Right, Callahan the third. Yeah.
Yes, he was. I just want to say thank you. I wasn't expecting to receive anything from this, but seeing your interest and hearing your stories and sharing what and your questions has been really important for me. And I'm very sorry that my siblings were not able to join us tonight. I'm going to send them the recording, and they'll be sorry they missed it.
And I'll get a duplicate of the CD, the DVD to you.
Thank you.
And we can always have a larger family gathering at some other time, Kathy.
Let's do that.
All right.
Thank you so much. What a treat it was to meet you, Glenn, and then Greg and everyone else, and to see some old faces too from a while. Thank you.
Kathy and others, we always close our meetings with 5 minutes of quiet prayer. So if we could spend 5 minutes in prayer together, that's the way we generally close our meeting. So I'll keep time of that. That's fine. Thank you very much. So before we end the session, I want to encourage everyone to visit Hearts and Homes for Refugees, the group that Kathy founded, at their website, Hearts and Homes for Refugees, to see how you might support their work. If you'd like to join our monthly Merton discussion group, just send me an email and I'll add you into the list. The book we're reading is The Road to Joy that Glenn spoke of earlier, Letters to New and Old Friends, which includes Merton's correspondence with Kathy's mom, Tommy O'Callahan. So thank you again, Kathy, and all of our guests, and good night. God bless.
Thank you very much, Kathy. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Take care, all.
God bless. Thank you.
Good night. Thank you all. Thanks, Greg and Glenn, everyone. It's so nice to meet you. Hope to see you again.
Blessings.
All right, goodbye.
Bye-bye.